Wes, you ready for me to go? Yep. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff event for the celebration of Oheb Shalom's 160th anniversary, perhaps 162nd anniversary, but welcome to our kickoff event. And we are truly, truly honored this evening to have with us virtually Shuly Rubin Schwartz, the Irving Lehrman Research Professor of American Jewish History, a groundbreaking scholar of American Jewish history and a visionary institutional leader, who is the 8th Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary and is the first woman to serve in this role since JTS was founded in 1886. She is a renowned educator, a renowned scholar, a renowned author. So welcome, Chancellor Schwartz. I would be remiss if I didn't take a couple of seconds just to highlight that this is our first Oheb 160 event. We have 4 more major events coming up. The first one on February 13th, our Morning of Learning, which will be modeled after kind of a New York Times University Day approach, led by the wonderful people from our Lifelong Learning Committee in conjunction with the Oheb 160 Committee. A day of social action, which will take place in Newark at a minimum at our original home on Prince Street, and that's Sunday, April the 3rd. Followed 2 weeks later on Saturday, April 16th, our Oheb 160 Spring Social or Party, where we can welcome the spring and enjoy each other's company, hopefully for a magnificent social event. And then we finish off our Oheb 160 celebration on May 22nd with the Oheb 160 concert. There'll be a few more events sprinkled in along the way, T-shirts and perhaps hats, and we'll all gather on the front lawn of the synagogue for an aerial photograph. And we've got some other ideas in the works. If anyone out there wishes to volunteer and help us lead any of these events or work on them, please, by all means, reach out to me. My email address and phone numbers are in the synagogue directory. We welcome all who might eagerly join our merry little band. Speaking of our merry little band, I would be remiss if I did not thank the Oheb 160 Coordinating Committee, Adam Selwyn, Carrie Harmon, Norma Schechner, Mark Gordon, Diane Weiss, and Allison Snyderman. Also, I want to take this opportunity to thank the benefactors of Oheb 160 and all who contribute their time and their resources to making Oheb Shalom the family and the community that we all love. With that, one last thing, what they call the run of show. I'm just going to quickly go through the events after me. I'll ask Paul Schechner to make some comments. Rabbi True is then going to introduce Chancellor Schwartz. We will then run until about 8:20, 8:25 with Chancellor Schwartz's remarks. We will then have a Q&A session, and thank you to all who submitted questions ahead of time. We have a slew of questions. We're going to try to get to them as best we can along the way, and our questioners will be Allison Snyderman and Stuart Schulman. Stuart, who serves as the chair of our Religious Affairs Committee, and they will be posing the questions to Chancellor Schwartz. And as we get towards about 8:40, 8:45, Rabbi True will have some closing remarks, and I'll do a couple of last thank yous, and we will sign off at 8:45. So without further ado, our esteemed, wonderful president, Paul Schechner.
Thank you, Leo. Welcome, Chancellor Schwartz, to another milestone event in our 160-year-long journey. It's truly an honor to have you here, well, virtually, of course, to help us celebrate. And friends, 160 years is quite a long time. We at Oheb Shalom, we are older than the IRS tax code. We predate the founding of South Orange and Maplewood as towns. We are older than the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And while we don't predate the Smithsonian Institution, The Washington Monument was being built at the same time that we were building our first synagogue on Prince Street. We predate and are proud to be one of the founding members of the United Synagogues of Conservative Judaism, one of the founding three. And Chancellor Schwartz, we even predate your esteemed institution, the Jewish Theological Seminary. Now, this continuity gives us a tradition and a perspective that mirrors Judaism itself. We today feel quite connected to the 15 or 20 so families that got together on Prince Street in Newark to found this synagogue. And some of us are related to those founding families. Now, while our dues are just a little bit higher than the 36 cents per family that we paid back then, although the complaining was probably the same, and we don't wear high silk hats anymore, most of our traditions, and certainly all of our values, being tikkun olam, being warm and welcoming, and being progressive, continue to this day. We are one of the first traditional congregations to have men and women sit together. I use the phrase traditional because we existed before conservatism was a movement. We are one of the first traditional congregations to have musical instruments, more specifically in Oregon. And we are one of the first synagogues to hire a woman cantor, as we hired direct from JTS's cantorial school, one of the first two women invested as a cantor Lippitz. So while we respect and honor our tradition and continuity, and our feet are firmly rooted in the pastor's tradition, our heads and our hearts are squarely focused on change and how we must continue to change to maintain our relevance and vitality. Your own Dr. Solomon Schechter, in 1910, he was the last chancellor to come address us, and that was at our 50th anniversary. So you're 110 years in the making. He then challenged our membership to build new styles, new practices, and new rituals that were as Jewish as the Torah, but as American as apple pie. Hence, we have a strong history of focusing on the future and how we can improve it. So tonight, we look forward to hearing from another chancellor about the next generation of Judaism and how it will evolve. So again, thank you for coming and sharing your perspective and helping us to mark this milestone event. With that, Rabbi True.
None of us really knows the influence we have on other people. And we each have our list of people who are in the foreground of our lives, who we know, friends, family, part of our daily circle, whom we know have influenced us in certain ways. And then there's others who are in the background. And it feels really beautiful, Dr. Schwartz, Chancellor Schwartz, that you are here and that I get to introduce you tonight, because you are somebody who for so many decades has been in the background of shaping institutions, programs, movement, an entire universe that has benefited me and everybody tuning in tonight, whether it's being friends with so many undergrads when you were dean of the JTS joint program with Columbia. And I remember sitting there at graduation and your beaming smile as my friends received their undergraduate diplomas, or my years as rabbinical student, and having you be one of the teachers on the faculty, or then moving into my years as a rabbinic fellow on the staff at JTS and serving with you in that way, whether it was being in rabbinical school with your son or having your daughter lead Minyan Katan when my children were teeny tiny, and I still hear her voice singing, "There's a dinosaur knocking at my door" every Shabbat. Or your sister and your brother-in-law, Rabbi Neil Krishan, who was my mentor during my own pulpit search process this past year. You have been somebody who has had these deep influences on my own life. And so it is wonderful to welcome you and to feel really honored by your presence here as we begin to celebrate our 160th anniversary. Friends, Dr. Rubin Schwartz is the Irving Lehrman Research Professor of American Jewish History. a groundbreaking scholar of American Jewish history, a visionary institutional leader. She is the 8th Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, the first woman to serve in this role since JTS was founded in 1886. Previously, Dr. Schwartz played a central role in shaping and strengthening JTS's academic programs while teaching and mentoring countless students. She has served as the Albert A. List College of Jewish Studies from 1993 to 2018, a long, strong, beautiful tenure. She served as, in 2010, she was also named Dean of the Gershon Kext Graduate School. In 2018, she assumed the provostship while continuing as Dean of the Kext School. As one of the first women on the JTS faculty, she played an instrumental role in introducing Jewish gender studies into the curriculum. As a scholar, she brings to light previously overlooked contributions of women to Jewish life and culture over the centuries, and continually expands our understanding of American Judaism. And so it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you and to turn the floor over to you, Chancellor Schwartz.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi True, for that wonderful, warm, and meaningful introduction. I too cherish those long connections that we have. I remember your kids in that Tat Shabbat era because I was bringing one of my grandkids to participate along in my daughter's Tat Shabbat, which she continues to do in her synagogue now. With her own children involved in that. And thank you also for that very warm introduction, Paul, and for giving us a sense of the long and really moving history of this congregation. You know, as a Jewish historian, I can tell you, for a synagogue to be thriving really anywhere in the world for 160 years, right, well into its second century is no small matter, given the precarious nature of the Jewish experience throughout the globe. And so it is a particular privilege for me to be here today. You may not know, but your synagogue plays an important role in my own growth as a professional. I taught in your religious school for, I believe, 2 years while I was a student at JTS. I sometimes was lucky enough to get a ride, but I often took the Erie Lackawanna Railroad. Probably a term you know well, but haven't heard in a long time, before it was called New Jersey Transit. And it was a privilege to be part of the synagogue. Rabbi Shapiro was the rabbi then. He was a wonderful mentor to me because he was really such a model as a rabbi scholar. As you know, he had an earned doctorate in medieval Jewish history himself, and was enormously encouraging to me in my own doctoral studies, encouraged me in my research, was one of the first individuals to publish one of my articles, and really someone that I have really great gratitude for his wisdom, for his counsel, and for his support. So it really just enhances my joy at being able to participate in this milestone anniversary that you have. And, just to share a little bit about my own personal journey to JTS. Rabbi True shared a lot about my career at JTS, but my association, while it doesn't go back as long as this synagogue, really is over 100 years old as well, because my grandfather was a graduate of JTS in 1920, so 101 years ago. He was someone who had a cheder education. He had come from Poland. He was living on the Lower East Side. He had a desire to learn more. And so while he was at City College, he went to JTS in its then undergraduate program called the Teachers Institute. And he became, fluent in Hebrew and very much in keeping with a deep Zionist and Hebraist tradition that dates back to my great-grandfather. And in subsequent generations, both my parents were graduates of JTS, my dad of the Rabbinical School, my mom of the undergraduate school called the Teachers Institute. My late husband was a JTS rabbi and a joint program alumnus, and my son as well is a graduate, and not only of the Rabbinical School, but of the Davidson School of Jewish Education. So I started my connection to JTS in high school. I had had a yeshiva education and then went to public high school and came in to JTS every Sunday for the Prosdor Hebrew High School program. On one level, I loved coming in because I got to see my Rama friends from New Jersey. We met in New York City at the time, stating the obvious to say we could not connect online. We didn't even really make long distance phone calls. So to be able to see each other every Sunday really kept us connected throughout the year. But in a more important vein, attending JTS at that stage in my life really was the first time that I developed an integrated way of thinking about my education and the place of Judaism, Jews, and Jewish culture within the wider world. It was not only a place that trained so many of the counselors, teachers, and rabbis that I admired, but it was a place where I began to think of my own identity as an American Jew in an integrated way, which just therefore gave me, it's been a great privilege for me to make my career at JTS and to really guide and mentor and shepherd so many generations of students to really taste that experience themselves. There was something magical to me about the importance of deep, rich, intellectually honest, and compelling Jewish learning that connects the richness of Judaism and the Jewish people, past, present, and future, and throughout the globe. And it connects us with others who share the same passions and who care deeply about ensuring the flourishing of Judaism in the future. So thank you. You know, you both, Leo and you, Rabbi Chu, have both mentioned that I'm the first woman serving in this role. You've also heard that I am a historian of gender. So I know how important it is symbolically for me to serve in this role. We know that for centuries, Jewish leadership was seen as the preserve of men. So many women are lost to history. We don't even have their names. Rarely did women have the education, the resources, or the opportunities to serve as leaders of their communities. And since the title of rabbi, the most prestigious title in the Jewish world, since that title was reserved for men, women often served as leaders in unofficial ways, sometimes by virtue of being married to rabbis, hence the study that I did on rabbis' wives, in which I really thought a little bit about how women exercised leadership when the kind of official channels of leadership were closed to them. So I know the tremendous impact that women have had in Jewish life. And I also experienced it, for many of those years that Rabbi True described. I was the only woman at that table at JTS, the only female dean, one of the first few female faculty members. And so I've always taken very seriously the importance of mentoring the dozens of women who worked with me in various capacities over the years. And, when I was appointed chancellor, I received so many touching notes from women who just felt as if I had lifted their spirits. I had made, I had given them a vision of possibility that they could not have ever hoped for. And they clearly experienced my appointment as an opportunity that would lift all boats. And I certainly hope that it does that. And I also heard from parents of young girls who just felt thrilled that their daughters would grow up in a world where this would be a reality, that they would know that there was a woman chancellor. And as those of us who study gender know, you can't be it if you can't see it. And so knowing that this is an option was something that was really important for so many people. And I feel privileged that in this role, in which I'm privileged as it is, because I love this work. I love working with students. I love helping to shape the future of the Jewish community through the leaders that we train, that I also have the opportunity, simply by virtue of my gender, to raise that sense of possibility for other girls and younger female professionals in the world. So I know some of you asked about my vision for JTS. You mentioned Paul Salman Schechter. The vision for JTS really begins with Solomon Schechter, and as a historian, I'm going to begin with that too, and then give you a sense of how my vision flows from the 7 wonderful chancellors who preceded me. Schechter brought together renowned faculty from all over the world to teach the texts, ideas, and history of the Jewish people, because he was certain that this learning would be foundational for the effective, inspired leadership that he saw was so sorely needed in this country. Rabbis who would be able to speak and deliver divrei Torah in English, who would understand baseball, who would be not only deeply learned in traditional Jewish texts and Jewish ideas and Jewish history, but would also be fully American. He cultivated a spirit of loving yet rigorous inquiry, and JTS became the place where critical questioning was encouraged, where multiple approaches to the study of Jewish text and the Jewish experience were considered, where this type of learning would enable generations of students to appreciate and be nourished by our centuries-old yet ever-evolving tradition. Schechter, in his inaugural address, said, "I regard nothing Jewish as foreign to me." And that, to me, signals an openness and a devotion to Jewish learning in its most expansive sense, where no questions are off the table. This is an orientation that continues to distinguish JTS. He also established this institution as a religious institution, and he and his wife, Matilda, understood that academic Jewish learning flourishes best when it is paired with a vibrant Jewish community, vibrant Jewish living, Jewish observance. All of this is integrated one with the other. So yes, the Jewish Theological Seminary also gave rise to conservative Judaism in North America. And yes, your rabbi, Rabbi Hoffman, was one of the early signatories to United Synagogue. He was one of Schechter's students. Schechter sent his students out to spread conservative Judaism, and he strategically placed his graduates in different areas to hasten the spread of this idea. What we now think of as conservative Judaism is an organic outgrowth of the kind of learning we do at JTS. It is critical study, it's intellectually honest, it is interested in plumbing the depths of our tradition to find religious meaning. It is a kind of learning that's open to everyone who shares a commitment to it, appreciating its riches, studying its treasures, and living it robustly. It is the kind of study that believes that this is a Judaism that can anchor us intellectually, morally, religiously, spiritually, anchor us in the contemporary world. And it is a tradition that is rich enough that we can come back to it again and again throughout our lives for new sources of inspiration and guidance. Because I don't know about you, but certainly me, what I needed from Judaism when I was 20 is not the same thing as I needed when I was 40, and not what I need today. And this led and continues to lead to continuing evolution in what we teach at JTS. Most obvious is the introduction of gender studies in my own era, something that Solomon Schechter never would have thought about, for sure. But we've also done that in other ways as well, through our Hendel Center for Ethics and Justice, our Milstein Center for Interreligious Understanding, our Block Kolker Center for the Spiritual Arts, our program in clinical pastoral education. These are different ways of growing and evolving in our learning, so that we are integrating that learning with ways that enable us to enrich the Jewish future for a greater number of individuals and meet the needs of the era in which we live. Conservative Judaism is grounded in the ideas, practices, and traditions that Jews have developed in different places and at different times in response to the divine imperative as expressed in our sacred texts. In that way, conservative Judaism is pluralistic to its core. And what do I mean by pluralistic? Conservative Judaism recognizes that the Jewish community that lived a deeply Jewish life in 12th century Cairo is not going to be the same Jewish community that is going to flourish in 21st century America. Religion, Judaism, must evolve even in the course of one lifespan. It encompasses 17th century women's prayers, Shabbat meals, marching for justice, and reading a Hebrew story to my grandchildren. It is a kind of Judaism that is intellectually curious and spiritually rich, that welcomes questioning and experimentation, and that values community traditions, but is not tied blindly to them. This is something your community knows well. Again, as we heard before from Paul, you have been in the vanguard, not only of adopting conservative Judaism for the synagogue, but being early experimenters with egalitarianism, with your concern for the disabled, welcoming Russian immigrants, feeding the hungry, and sheltering the homeless. And this kind of impulse that is epitomized in conservative Judaism is born of a certain level of humility, a humility that focuses on serving others and bringing in the marginalized, that eschews extremes, that is intellectually honest, non-dogmatic, that is open to different voices and perspectives, because we don't know where the new ideas are going to come from, that is welcoming to all, that is emotionally deep, and that is responsive to people's needs. This is the kind of Judaism that we need in the United States, in Israel, now more than ever. Several of you have asked me, what is JTS's role in the conservative movement, and what is its relationship to all of the other institutions of the conservative movement? You heard that JTS really has been the incubator of conservative Judaism since the days of Solomon Schechter. It is literally responsible for the creation of United Synagogue, as well as the Camp Ramah system, the first camp, and then the Ramah movement in general. So everything grew out of JTS for the reasons that I explained. But JTS remains an institution of higher learning that trains rabbis, cantors, lay leaders, Jewish educators, Jewish communal professionals, and Jewish academics. We train leaders for the North American Jewish community and beyond. We, the conservative movement, the leadership of the movement, that is it really resides with the Rabbinical Assembly and the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, now under the leadership of Rabbi Jacob Blumenthal. So, of course, we work closely together, but that is not my job. My job is not the movement itself, but it certainly is, I take very seriously the need for us to develop a compelling and articulate vision of conservative Judaism for the 21st century. And, I think I've begun to give you a taste of what that vision is. I think that we have a very important role to play in this particular moment. And in that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2020 Pew study, because I think that puts a lot of this into bold relief. I'm not going to talk so much about the particular things in which it talks about conservative Jews and the percentage of conservative Jews that are involved, except to say that it is very clear from this study, as it was in the 2013 study, that the most intensively Jewishly engaged non-Orthodox Jews are conservative Jews. So this cohort, while smaller than it was, is extraordinarily important. And I know from the experience of our graduates how many conservative synagogues are flourishing thanks to inspired leadership and dedicated lay leaders, and that many of our graduates serve in spaces that are not specifically conservative synagogues. These are individuals who work on college campuses, who work in summer camps, who work in study spaces and startup institutions or Jewish nonprofits, helping Jews access a thick Jewish culture, ritual ideas, sacred texts, stories, etc. One of the things we learn in the Pew study is, as we saw, it creates this kind of false dichotomy between being a Jew by religion and a Jew of no religion. And I think we all know that that's not how Judaism works. Judaism, the people and Judaism, Jews the people and Judaism the faith, are intertwined and can't be disentangled. They enrich one another. With Judaism at the core, we can enrich and continue to seed Jewish culture and Jewish civilization. And that's what we would call Yiddishkeit. And so what we do at JTS is to train the leaders who can appreciate the gifts that Judaism offers to all Jews, who can speak to all different kinds of Jews, bridge the widening divide that we see in our country, in our politics, and within the Jewish people as well. We need leaders who can offer a strong, steady, confident, centrist, intellectual, cultural, and religious voice to anchor and inspire the next generation of Jews. These are Jews who have no ties to denominational Judaism, or whose ties are weak to denominational labels, and who would benefit from being touched to understand the ways in which Judaism can enrich their lives. Because what we see in the Pew study is that there are a significant number of Jews, well over half of the Jews, who say they're not Jews of religion, feel a sense of belonging to the Jewish people, feel a sense of responsibility to helping Jews around the world, who believe that caring about Israel is an important part of what being Jewish means to them. Those are the individuals that I think conservative Judaism can touch with its compelling ideas of a deep attachment to a rich tradition to Judaism, and a full grounding in the contemporary world with all of the challenges and with all of the opportunities that it presents. So I think that in order to do that, we need to encourage earnest experimentation. We are living now in an era in which I haven't seen this level of ferment and experimentation into how to find meaning as Jews. I think the pandemic hastened that sense of experimentation in large measure by necessity, of course, because of the pandemic. But it's thrilling to see this level of experimentation. After all, Jews could simply have said, I can't really think about being Jewish right now. I'm worried about my health and the health of my loved ones. I'm worried about where I'm going to get food. I'm worried about how to take care of the necessities. I'm worried about losing my job. I don't have time to worry about Judaism. I'll deal with Judaism after COVID. That is not what happened. On the contrary, we saw congregations all over the country and Jews all over the country saying, no, we got to pivot. We got to find new ways to do this. And it's thrilling to see what has emerged from that. So we don't know. We don't know what's going to stick. But we know that with this level of commitment and concern and energy and creativity, we are going to write the next chapter of Jewish life. And that is our most important responsibility as conservative Jews, not only to take what those before us have given to us, but to make sure that we continue this evolutionary process for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, so that we leave them the rich, compelling Judaism that will resonate for them in their own lives. Okay, I'm going to stop now and be to answer questions.
All right, we're going to start with Allison. She'll ask our first question, then it'll be followed by Stuart for 2 questions, and then back to Allison, and we'll alternate at that point. Getting in as many as we can, given the time constraints. So, Allison, please start us off.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Chancellor. It's great to meet you, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and perspectives, and really congratulations for becoming this woman Chancellor. This is our first question. In what ways do you see your role as a leader in conservative Judaism, especially as a woman? You talked about leadership and all the different people who are leaders in the conservative movement. And related, can you tell us a little bit more about your priorities and what you see as those emerging opportunities?
I'm going to, I answered part of the first half of your question in my remarks. So what I'm going to add to that is to tell you by way of illustration with a story, what I think that I can uniquely add to the story of Jewish women as a conservative Jew is to highlight the way in which conservative Judaism enhances my Judaism as a woman, as a movement that has evolved to really embrace egalitarianism, but as a movement that, by being deeply attached to tradition, places a great deal of weight on minhag, on Jewish traditions. I love the fact that at the age of 60, I could decide that I was going to take upon myself the challenge of learning how to be the shlichat tzibur, to lead the congregation in mincha tefillah on Yom Kippur, something my father always did, my brother does, and I have a pretty good voice, good enough for mincha for sure, and I love the nusach, and I decided to take that on. But one of the most sacred times for me on Yom Kippur is coming home during the break, and even though I don't need to do this because now it's only my husband and me, no kids at home, I don't have to prepare for breakfast during that time. But I always did that with my mother and my grandmother. We would cut up the melon, we would set the table, we would get all the food ready and leave it in the refrigerator so that when we got home, we could just eat. So that it is as religious an act for me to cut up the melon, because I feel like I'm communing with my foremothers when I do that. And it's it is extraordinarily meaningful for me to lead mincha on Yom Kippur as well. That to me epitomizes what I get to do as a conservative Jewish woman, and I can model that for others. I don't remember the second half of your question.
Well, thank you. The second half was, you told us some about your priorities and about the emerging opportunities, and I'm curious if you have any specific things in mind, or about some new opportunities, especially, things are changing so much, and what you see as your vision.
Again, I think I shared as much as I can share. We're in the middle of that moment. We have not emerged on the other end. So it's not clear yet, I don't think, to any of us. But I think it will become clear. And we at JTS are kind of poised to seize on those opportunities. We are actually in the middle of a strategic planning process. So stay tuned and check back in a couple months.
Stuart, you're up next with a couple of questions.
Thank you, Leo, and Chancellor. Thank you for joining us to celebrate our 160th or 162nd year of serving our community. You did a great job of laying out what it means to be a conservative Jew. That our tradition is centuries old, yet ever evolving. We don't define ourselves as being a middle ground between Orthodox and liberal Judaism, but we find ourselves positioned there. So this is sort of a two-part question about the gap between conservative Judaism and Orthodoxy on the one hand, and the difference between conservative Jewry and other progressive movements on the other, and the challenges that come with being in the middle there. Conservative Bet Dins and conservative Hashgacha is not recognized by Orthodox Jews generally. Should we be trying to attempt to bridge that gap between Orthodoxy and conservatism, or should we be looking to go our own way, our own direction, perhaps closer to the other progressive movements? And then on the other hand, while conservative movement and Reconstructionism and reform have moved closer to one another over the years, conservative Judaism has its roots in halakha. The other movements view halakha as a roadmap, but not always governing. And how do we maintain our place at the progressive table when we are not coming from the same place in that regard?
So I think different streams of Judaism are extraordinarily important. We human beings are complicated. We have different ways of our sensibilities differ, our priorities differ. What speaks to us spiritually differs. So I don't really see as my task to blur distinctions and grow closer or farther. I don't see any benefit to that at all. I think what is important is to provide a compelling vision of Judaism that I think will be compelling to many Jews. Will it be compelling to all? No, but of course it won't. Jews are never going to get along. But that's good. You know, we're different. I happen to believe that in this particular era of polarization, a strong centrist voice that is not on one extreme or another is extraordinarily important. I think our society needs it. I think we all need it. You know, if you look at the Pew study, what's alarming are the extremes. Only 9% of Orthodox Jews feel that they have much in common with Reform Jews, and 9% of Reform Jews feel that they have much in common with Orthodox Jews. That's very sad. And I think that is the bigger question here. And I think that as a movement in the center, I would not, to me, I don't see conservative Judaism as a progressive movement. I see it as an anchoring movement, certainly with some progressive views. But I think that kind of anchoring space that really is open to hearing voices on the right and the left and the center. That's what we are about.
Thank you, Chancellor. Let me follow up with another question that is going to be perhaps equally, as divisive here. One of the consequences of being a movement where our roots are in halakha, but we try to accommodate, modernity and change as much as possible, is that we haven't found a perfect way to accommodate interfaith couples. And let me preface by saying, I know that you don't speak for the CJLS. I know that you don't speak for the Rabbinic Assembly, but perhaps you're privy to their thinking. And with that in mind, what do you see as the emerging change, if any, with regard to sanctioning in some way interfaith marriages, especially when the bride is Jewish and their children would be Jewish?
So I'm not privy to any of those conversations. I'm not a rabbi. You're not, anything I say, you're just going to hear me talking. I am not talking for anyone or anything official. I think that, look, I think that there are two things at play here with the question of intermarriage in my mind. One is that we have to do a much better job of showing, of believing and exhibiting respect for every human being. And I would say a great deal of there's a level of admiration for any individual who wants to throw their lot in with the Jewish people, whether they do so formally through conversion or informally by being supportive of the Jewish family that they are part of. I think that there's a lot that we can do to be open and welcoming and supportive and encouraging and grateful for individuals who do that. And it always surprised me that we weren't always doing a better job of that. That I think that that's the issue more than anything else. Individuals who choose not to convert to Judaism are making a choice. If they're not Jews, they're not Jews. They may be very supportive of raising Jewish children, of being part of a Jewish family, but all individuals understand what it means. You either are or you're not Jewish. And Rabbi True, I'm sure, would lovingly and intelligently bring any person to Judaism who wants to become a Jew. But we make all kinds of distinctions in life, and they're privileged that come with being Jewish. And anyone can become a Jew. So it seems to me that the solution lies with being very warm and open and embracing and very clear about what choices people make. And those decisions can change over the course of a lifetime. There are many individuals who convert many, many years after marriage because they've been part of a loving Jewish community and they've seen the richness of what Judaism has to offer, but they weren't ready. So all of any and all of those things are possible.
Allison?
Great. Here's another question. How do you think the conservative movement needs to evolve to maintain relevance across generations? And what can JTS do in its education of rabbinical candidates and scholars to help that evolution?
I mean, I think that I've kind of already answered the first part of it. I think it needs to be nimble. It needs to participate in the chain of tradition, right? Each generation is obligated, in my opinion, to figure out how to make Judaism meaningful and relevant for its own generation. I think that is what we are doing now. Partly, we see it most clearly during COVID, when we've had to accelerate the pace of change, but that's what we need to do. What do I need to do as a head of an institution? I need to train leaders to be deeply versed in our tradition, to feel learned, competent, and confident in their learning, nourished by their learning, and to have the tools to be able to continue to nourish themselves throughout their careers, right? And then that's how we see the amazing rabbis out there in the world, right? You can't teach everything in rabbinical school, just as lawyers don't know how to practice law after law school, and doctors can't practice medicine until they go through residency, right? You learn over time how to take that learning and be able to communicate it in a way that is compelling to the various constituencies that you serve. We help our students learn how to do that through their internships, through, you know, all of the various field opportunities that they have. But without that core knowledge, the mentoring, the support group that they create as a class, that's what gives them the deep experience that will enable them to flourish. And then they're going to figure out, right? They're not my generation. They're the generation, they're going to serve the generation after us. And so they are going to, we will see what they will do, right? Because they can't come up with today's answers. It won't help us to teach them what they should do now. They need to have within them the ability to figure out what to do in 20 years.
Thank you. There's a related question that focuses specifically on opportunities and challenges that the conservative movement faces in attracting and engaging some new members, including young families, which I know you touched on already, but if you have anything else to add about.
No, I just think what we all know is they need to go outside the synagogue walls, right? Because young families, more of them are not affiliated than are affiliated. So we need to go and find young families where they are and help them nourish Jewish families in ways that are meaningful to them, and then help them understand that doing that in a community of others and with the benefit of a rabbi, not just Google, is worth it, is worth the extra investment, right? That's what we need to do.
And we have one last question.
Our last question.
Yeah, thank you. One of the core missions, of course, of a couple of the schools at JTS is training and ordaining rabbis and cantors. So a question has come in: what is the number of rabbis and cantors graduating this year? How does that compare to past trends? And does supply match demand? Are we looking for more candidates or more schools to place them in?
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I will tell you that the majority of students at JTS are not studying for the rabbinate or the cantorate, but they are undergraduate students. They are students studying for careers in Jewish education, for careers in Jewish communal service or academia. And our undergraduates, they will be you. They will be the lay leaders of the future, right? So they are as important as our leaders. We are training rabbis and cantors. The number of students that we ordain is less than it once was for two reasons. One is that there are several more non-Orthodox rabbinical schools that have been spawned in the last 20 years. JTS is not the only place to become a conservative rabbi, and certainly not the only place to become a non-Orthodox rabbi. But I would say the larger issue is that we as a Jewish community need to do a better job of raising up the importance of serving the Jewish people. So I will end this by charging all of you. Rabbi True talked about the importance of mentors. I talked about the importance of mentors. I've read applications from students for 30 years And I can tell you that each application names one person who made a difference in that student's life. And you all can think of one person who has that spark that just makes them stand out in your synagogue. And that could be an amazing Jewish professional. And I don't know why, but we as a people are in an era where we think, oh, I don't want to impose. I'm not going to say anything. I think that, but I'm not really going to do anything about it. I'm deputizing you. Put your proverbial hand on that shoulder and say, have you ever thought about being a camp director, being a rabbi, being an educator? Because, you know, you're terrific. You read Torah beautifully. I see how you are with the young kids in the religious school. Whatever it is that you see, you will change that person's life, and you may never even know that you did that. But don't be shy, because the future of the Jewish people depends on all of us, and you have to help us identify that talent and send them to JTS. We'll take care of the rest.
Rabbi True, your closing remarks.
Thank you, Chancellor Schwartz. And I'm so glad that you ended us on a note of swinging us back from this present moment that we're in toward looking at the future, which brings us back from this trajectory of starting with where Paul opened us, which is this is Oheb's 160th anniversary. And I find myself thinking how funny age is, right? We spend our childhoods wishing we were older. And then there's a period in our middle age where maybe we wish we were younger. And then we get to a certain age, if we are blessed with longevity, nice big number. And we're really proud often of that nice big number. And I'm smiling and thinking about that because actually this is our 161st year, friends. Let's be clear, right? Let's be really clear that we are actually older than 162. Paul's saying, I didn't know what month we were founded, Paul. So, all right, 162. And we put off the celebration because of the pandemic. And so to be here celebrating our 160th anniversary on our 162nd year in this newfangled technology of Zoom, which 160 years from now, no one's going to know what that was. And some historian of the congregation a long time from now is going to look back and read these notes and say, wow, the first woman chancellor, the first all-women clergy team. They were so obsessed with this pandemic. That was like a nothing. We're going to go figure out what this pandemic thing was. What was it? And it just feels like we're in this moment of history that feels so beautiful and yet is so particular and yet is part of a really long stretch of Jewish history, not only for Oheb Shalom, but for the American Jewish people and the Jewish community ad olam, right? Mi olam ad olam, right? They're all space and all time. And I think back to 1880, the year that JTS was founded. By then, Oheb Shalom was already 20 years old, right? The Miriam Sisterhood was founded that year, one of the first sisterhoods and one of our founding congregations creating Women's League of Conservative Judaism. And 5 years later, Rabbi Bernard Drachman was born in America, but received his rabbinical degree in Germany. And he was brought on to begin to use English in the synagogue. He preached alternate weeks in German and in English. So here we are thinking about the ways we need to modernize and move forward. But even all those years ago, this was a problem then, it's a problem now. It's how we stay fresh as the ever evolving, ever old, ever young Jewish people. And I share this to conclude our evening this night, because with all of this celebration with Chancellor Schwartz and with all of us as a congregation, I'm confident that our future is as bright and interesting and bold as our first 162 years have been. So thank you, Chancellor Schwartz, and thank you all for joining. Leo, a huge thank you to you and all of the work you have done and your team has done. And I turn the floor back over to you to close us out.
Thank you to all present. Thank you to the executive committee, Rabbi True, and the Shul staff for your support and encouragement. Thank you to the Oheb 160 committee for your willingness to help guide our 160th anniversary celebration. Thank you to Chancellor Schwartz for honoring us this evening by your presence and helping us to kick off this celebration. We hope to see you all at the next Oheb 160 event. Good night, everyone, and stay safe.